Can you hear me now?
Good.
Can you hear me now?
I was
Good. Welcome back to the CONVO Couch, ladies and gentlemen. I am Pastor Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella.
Now, we have a great show for you today.
We do.
The fam has been fired up to no avail.
When am I not fired up, to be honest?
I mean, sometimes you get a little bit more fired up than others. When people talk shit about Bernie Sanders or people talk shit about Tulsi Gabbard, your fieriness goes from like an 8 to a 12.4 on a scale of 10. And especially today, my friend called me, fam. I had to tell you, I was like, I can't wait to get Fiorella on the couch today because she's just going to go off. Because my friend, who's, he's not a big political guy, he watched the town hall debate yesterday, and he thought that Bernie Sanders slayed it.
Oh.
Randy from American Idol type, slayed it, dog. Just faced the tough questions. He wasn't even aware that it was a loaded audience. And the next day he gets on the YouTubes, he gets on the internet, and he sees that CNN and MSNBC and all the mainstream media, social network is just slamming Bernie Sanders as if he can do no right.
Right. Exactly. So Bernie Sanders, as many of you all know, went on a CNN town hall yesterday, to talk about his 2020 campaign. And of course, as Pasta said, the mainstream media and CNN pundits manipulated the questions. And we have more evidence of that later on. But let's just start tackling all the things Bernie talked about to begin. First of all, Bernie Sanders is clearly listening on Venezuela. He's listening to his progressive base. He's listening to what we were upset about. And by the way, it is absolutely crucial and almost necessary to criticize people you like, people you support, because that only makes them better. No one is above criticism. And I think Bernie Sanders is one of those people that got criticized on his stance in Venezuela. So he refused to call Maduro a dictator, which is a first, by the way, where he dodged calling him a dictator. He also said the people of Venezuela must decide that we must stay out. America must stay out. And I am glad he emphasized that, because that's one of the main criticisms that people were speaking out against him on. And CNN, of course, goes and turns this around and says, well, Bernie Sanders didn't label the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro a dictator tonight, despite criticizing the government for failing to hold the democratic elections. So that's where some of us were kind of like, well, he is saying that the elections weren't democratic, which isn't true. But, he's kind of touting that line.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of playing around a little bit because he has to. I mean, he's running. Although I disagree with his tactic, I think he's trying to make sure that we know he's a non-interventionist candidate.
Yeah, I think that was the most important message that Bernie Sanders kind of laid out there. The fact that he is a non-interventionist. He's still kind of a little wishy-washy with a few things, fam. I found some articles and stuff when even Carter and the Carter Institute talking about the fact that Venezuela has some of the best election integrity out there. So even Jimmy Carter himself said a couple of years ago that the election integrity in Venezuela is up to tack. Not to mention they have all of South America, Central America. They brought in other people to watch over these elections for quite some time right now, and their elections are much better, I think, than our elections out there.
Exactly.
And like I said, if Jimmy Carter's saying that they have fair elections, you have to take Jimmy Carter's word for it.
And also, I wanted to point out one other thing. Bernie Sanders said, I'm old enough to remember the war in Vietnam before ticking off past American political interference in Central and South America. I am very fearful of the United States continuing to do what it has done in the past. The United States overthrew a democratically elected government in Chile and in Brazil and in Guatemala, only to name a few because we know there's more.
He could have went on and on there.
Right. And he then compared the despotic regime in Saudi Arabia. He didn't actually compare the regime in Saudi Arabia, equate it, but he did compare the two and saying, if this is happening in Saudi Arabia and we haven't done anything, why all of a sudden supposedly this is the same thing in Venezuela? And that's actually a misframing by CNN, because he didn't compare them saying they were the same. He actually compared them to suggest they were not the same and to suggest our hypocrisy in coming into and criticizing Venezuela and trying to go in there when we are not doing the same thing with Saudi Arabia.
I thought it was a masterful pivot. This was another reason why I said that, hey, Bernie Sanders needs to be president. There are certain things I don't like. Once again, I didn't like the fact that he was kind of saying the elections lacked some integrity. But for the most part, I thought the pivot to say, hey, whoa, wait a second. We have a talk about this crazy regime in Saudi Arabia, and yet I don't hear people, especially the mainstream media, calling to intervene in Saudi Arabia. Why? Because we're their bitch and we sell them arms and we take money.
And let's go ahead and show that clip real quick, Johnny.
Yeah.
We have another question. I want to bring in Chanel Saldana, student at American University here in Washington. She's from Pittsburgh.
Good evening. In light of the recent events in Venezuela, you came out against U.S. intervention, a contentious stance as many in Venezuela are currently suffering at the hands of Maduro through starvation and violence, and it is clear that he will not let humanitarian aid in. Under these circumstances and moving forward, do you have a clear position on U.S. intervention overseas, both economically and militarily, for nations that are under the regimes of these oppressive dictators?
Thank you. Good question. There are a lot of awful things happening in the world, and what's going on in Venezuela is terrible. The economy is a disaster. People are living in hunger and in fear. I strongly believe there has to be an international humanitarian effort to improve lives for the people. I think the evidence is pretty clear that the last election in Venezuela was not a free and fair election. And under international supervision, I want to see a free and fair election. But to answer your question, let me say this. I am old enough to remember the war in Vietnam. And I was as active as I could trying to keep the United States from going to war in Iraq. I was in the Congress at that point. And I am very fearful of the United States continuing to do what it has done in the past. As you know, or may know, the United States overthrew a democratically elected government in Chile and in Brazil and in Guatemala and in other countries around the world. So as someone who fervently believes in human rights and democracy, we have got to do everything that we can. But I think sometimes you have unintended consequences when a powerful nation goes in and tells people who their government will be.
Okay, and so he pretty much says what we said he said. I mean, he's pretty much on it. And I think it's very important that we note that he's one of two people basically speaking out against our interventionism. The other person is Tulsi Gabbard, who hasn't had a town hall. And she's more bold on that stance. But other than her, Bernie Sanders is literally the only person that is saying, hey, we've done this before in other countries. We've thrown out their democratically elected leaders and installed our own. And that's a very brave thing to say because the military-industrial complex is such a powerful force in the United States and throughout the world, clearly.
Yeah.
So
I mean, well, this is the one area where, Bernie Sanders still needs a little bit more pushing and guidance, and why it's important to have Tulsi Gabbard on that stage, in the debate stage, when it comes to this particular issue. And like I said, we have multiple reports talking about election integrity in Venezuela. How people overseeing it. And like I said, when Jimmy Carter says it's a fair election, you got to stand by that. So I don't like the fact that we keep on saying that there's not fair elections there. And it's one area I wish where Senator Sanders would push for the election integrity on the left. So to me, that was one part where I'm like, well, hey, I don't care. We don't have fair elections here. What about the next point, fam?
Okay, so for the next point, I have that most people in America are independents. Okay, so Bernie understands how to win them and Republicans over. And that's one of the things that doesn't always sit well with centrists. So Bernie talked about understanding that the majority of Americans are independent, and that's according to a Gallup poll, about 42% of people are independent. And this is a 2017 poll, by the way. And he also understands that the Democratic Party has abandoned working class white people and has done this for years. They used to be the party of the people, and a lot of working class rural people supported the Democratic Party, as many of you know from your history classes. But then these people felt left behind, and they felt like they were not taken into account. Now, that doesn't mean that the people that voted, all of the people that voted for Donald Trump were actually racist. And it means that these people just felt like abandoned. And so Bernie made that point. And this point kind of I guess turns off some people because people don't want to hear that. They want to assume that every single person that voted for Donald Trump is a racist. Yeah. They want to completely cut out the conversation, which is exactly why Donald Trump was elected.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have these conversations, and we need to have these conversations. And Bernie Sanders understands that, which is one of the reasons why he can garner full support across the aisle. And Trump painted himself as a populist and actually got a lot of these people to vote for him, even though we know he's not an anti-establishment candidate. Mm-hmm. And so here's an often overlooked statistic discussing candidate viability. This is a picture we have. The average favorability of the Democratic candidates among Republican voters is -5%. Bernie is favorability is 25%.
Yeah, fam, we talked about this a long time ago. We've been saying this stuff. There's stuff I put up from Jonathan Pye, and I have a lot of I still have this argument today when I say not everybody who voted for Trump is a racist or a bigot or, you know what I'm saying, is anti-immigration and stuff like that. A lot of them just feel they were abandoned by this Democratic Party. And they don't want to give power back to this Democratic Party. So they were willing to try anything else, fam. So they did. And that's something that Bernie stays on message with. And that's why he's not big into identity politics. He addresses the issues, but he doesn't kind of just lash out and attack and attack and attack. And this is one area last night he showed me why he deserves to be president. When he said that, that was probably one of my favorite things about the whole debate. And he was saying that everybody who voted for Trump is a racist. And I think we need to get that through our mind. So.
And we have a part of the video to kind of talk about that.
I love this part. Favorite part.
You know, basically says the Wolf Blitzer and other people in the media produce fake news. They're liars. They are enemies of the people. Understand what that means. This is an attack on the very fundamentals of American democracy. Because Trump does not want to be criticized. What he wants to do is disparage the media so that people do not believe what the media says. Now, my approach, and I should tell you that in the last several years, as I go around the country, and I will do it in this campaign, I go not only into communities which are progressive or democratic, we head out to Trump country. We head out to Trump country. And we are going to talk to those people. And we are going to expose Trump as the liar and fraud that he is. All right? Trump told working people that he was going to be on their side. He is not on their side, and its record proves that quite clearly. He is on the side of the billionaire class. And we're going to make that very clear. And I think by the end of this campaign, I suspect that a number of people who voted for Donald Trump
hard not to hear
will understand that he is not their friend and that the agenda that we have, which is prepared to take on the billionaire class, is the agenda that they will support.
If you're the Democrat...
Bam.
Okay. So as you guys have seen, Bernie's tactic, and it's very intelligent, is to go and talk to the other side, is to build those relationships, because he understands that a lot of these people are focused on the economics of the situation, the fact that they can't feed their families, the fact that they aren't making money like they should be making, and that is a chord that goes through a lot of us, and he is so focused on that instead of being focused on like labeling people, which creates more of a divide.
Yeah, you know what word he didn't use last night, fam, that we hear a lot of our friends used a little bit too much for me lately? The word privileged. You never hear that word come out of Bernie Sanders' mouth. I'm not to say that there isn't privilege, but whatnot. He's not going to use that divisive, attacking, kind of rhetoric. He's going to talk about, what he believes is to be true, is that there's a lot of white working class family people who have been abandoned. And it's not that they just voted for Trump for a reason. It's that we have to give them something. We have to, help them out. All workers across the board. That was one of my favorite parts of that town hall last night, fam. Let's go to the third part, because this is the hard one, really. And I saw you got into a lot of talk, and this is such a broad area. It's hard to discuss. It's hard to understand, fam. Talk about this right here.
Okay, so Warren and Kamala Harris all of a sudden have come to talk about reparations, but they don't have any sort of plan. They have absolutely no kind of direction as to where this goes. They have no specifics. It is an empty platitude full plan. And that is not to say that first of all, personally, regardless, outside of everything, in my opinion, we do need reparations. That's not what's being discussed here. What's going to be discussed here is the fact that they are manipulating this for political gain, And they are trying to paint Bernie Sanders, not necessarily just Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, but the entire Democratic establishment is once again using the same old tactics from 2016 to paint Sanders as a sexist, racist, person of color man. Yeah. And first of all, that if we're going to talk about that, that's he's Jewish, so he's not just a typical white man. Yeah. That's only used when it's convenient. And then also, let's talk about reparations. Centrists and these people who play to identity politics and white saviors are actually using identity politics to be more important, and symbolic platitudes more important than actual policy, which is a huge problem with me and with a lot of people of color, because you know what? That doesn't change it for us. That doesn't actually help us. So let's look at a text that Bernie Sanders kind of laid out right here. Blitzer asked him, do you support reparations? He said, Black wealth has plummeted in this country because of racism and income inequality, and I have a plan with Senator Clyburn to reverse that by bringing better resources to communities that have been damaged by racism and poverty. Then Blitzer says, yes, Bernie, but what do you think about reparations? And he says, didn't I just answer that? Do you want him to say the words? Apparently, yeah. Yes, Bernie. Well, Elizabeth Warren and Julian Castro say they want reparations. Yeah. Bernie, but, well, what does that mean? What do they mean when they say that? And that's the point I'm trying to make. What do they mean when they say that? They don't even know what they mean when they say that. Yeah. That's the thing. They have no idea. And then he goes back to talking about what Elizabeth Warren said. Well, Elizabeth Warren says we need to bring wealth back to struggling communities affected by slavery. Yeah, well, no shit. But okay, so then Bernie's like, yes, I agree with Warren about that. He's literally telling you he agrees that we need to do that. And then he says, Blitzer says, in 2016, you said that reparations were divisive. And he says, well, that depends on what the word means. And I know that you don't want to be divisive, do you? So it's just, they're just kind of manipulating this and throwing it at him.
This is a wedge that they're trying to jam in there, whatnot. And this is about, getting the people of color's votes like they did last time with Hillary Clinton during those primaries. They're trying to use the same tactics as playing Bernie Sanders off as a racist, as a misogynist. And this is the word. This is right there, the avenue where they're attacking it through this reparations clause, because reparations mean such a broad thing. Marianne Williamson, who's running for president, a lot of people don't know, she's a California person, whatnot. Mm-hmm. She said she believes in reparations, but she specifically said that those reparations should be paid by the top 1% of the families who benefited through slavery. Them. You know what I'm saying? So
100% agree with her.
You could say the word reparations, but it's a broad word, and you have to kind of condense it and put it in right there. I know Bernie Sanders doesn't want to say the word reparations so much because he doesn't want to be divisive, because he wants to help all workers across the board while still not ignoring the problems that happen in the people of color
community.
So,
exactly
addressing it, but how we work at it, how we fix the problem is a whole nother argument.
And there was a lot of crap posting on Facebook and Twitter saying that Bernie Sanders threw people of color under the bus, and actually he didn't. He just made it clear that this disastrous economy hurts us all, that no matter whether you're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, as a civil rights activist, as a man who marched with MLK, as a man who changed himself to a woman of color, as a man that has been enacting policy to actually help people of color, he understands that we all suffer under this oligarchy. Yeah. This whole thing has always been, since 2015, about us versus the top 1%. And we cannot lose sight of that, or we will lose this election. And by the way, reparations is already dividing the left. It's progressives attacking progressives. It is going to cause us to lose the election. Let's think about this really quick. If Bernie Sanders goes and supports reparations right now and says, oh, yeah, I support reparations, it is irresponsible because it is completely general. We have no idea what that means. People are going to make their own assumptions. If he goes and does that, he's going to lose many of his independent Republican or voters who are just like, what does that even mean? He's going to lose that. He's not going to make it to the general. Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris know it's an empty promise. There's zero statistic probability of them being able to pass that into the general. And if they even run on it in the general, they will lose to Donald Trump. And if Bernie doesn't say the word, he's now being attacked. And so it is up to us to set the narrative straight. It doesn't matter whether we believe in reparations or not. And we do believe in reparations. Many of us do. I personally do. But it has to be specific. It has to be targeted. It has to be pragmatic. And it has to be completely filled out in a way that we know what it means. We know exactly what that means, and we know how we're going to do it. But for Bernie Sanders, it is completely going to make him lose the election. So we have two options here. We have the people who see the race issue as the ultimate end goal, or we have people who see that the economics encompasses all of this together, because climate change is actually expanded through our economic system. Like, the oligarchy allows for something like the fossil fuel industry and the blatant use of our fossil fuel and our resources to hurt us and to hurt our planet and climate change. So we need to address climate change and the economics. And through addressing that, we are also going to address the racial issues. And they're part of the same system that exists under this oligarchy. We cannot divide those issues. We need to move forward.
I think that a lot of people have to remember and realize, and especially getting onto this next topic. I don't know. Did you want to play a video bit?
Yeah,
I want to reiterate
really
real quick before we play this video that Martin Luther King was killed when he was going on his Poor People's Campaign.
Exactly.
When he was directly attacking the economic issue for all people of color, for all citizens, for all workers, that's when he was murdered and killed. And Bernie Sanders is staying on that MLK
Malcolm
path.
X message.
You know what I'm saying? It's all about the oligarchs. Racism and capitalism are on the same side of the coin, and we have to address that. Fam, you had some video.
Yeah, so let's show the video at, I believe, 43:29, and we have two little segments.
From Noella Sama, he's a policy analyst here in Washington.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. There's a deep sense of mistrust for you by some within the African American community. Many feel you undermined Secretary Clinton after her nomination by not showing enough support, and which contributed to President Trump being elected. Along with that, many also feel that you are at times racially insensitive, and by virtue of your background, don't reflect their experience enough. How do you address these concerns, and what's your approach to winning their votes?
Well, first of all, I reject the first premise that you made. I knocked my brains out. In fact, I just saw a letter today from Hillary Clinton, which said, "Thank you, Bernie, for working so hard in my election." All right. We went to state after state. I think we had 35, 40 rallies in all of the battleground states. So I do not accept for one moment that I did not do everything that I could. And then people say, well, you know, some of your supporters voted for Trump. True. But some of Hillary's supporters in 2008 voted for McCain. That's the reality. More of those did that than voted for me. Now, on the second point, okay, we ended up winning among younger people more votes from young African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, Native Americans than Clinton and Trump combined. All right. Furthermore, if you look at the polling out there, we're doing quite well with the African American community. But let me just raise an issue here. Maybe I haven't been as strong on this issue as I should be. I talk about the fact that we have a nation of massive inequality, okay? And I believe that. I think that's the most important issue we can talk about. But within that inequality, we have another inequality, and that is racial disparity. And it's important that everybody understands that. That means that the wealth gap between a white family and a black family is 10-1. If you are a black mother, the likelihood is that you will have a baby that will die. Your infant mortality rate 2.5 times higher than a white mother. If you are a black businessman, I remember talking to a fellow in Milwaukee, black businessman, said, Bernie, I can't get a loan from the bank. And his business is pretty good because of redlining. Black kids are leaving college more deeply in debt than white kids. So we have an enormous amount of disparity in wealth, in education, in health that must be addressed. And I will work as hard as I can. Number one, to have a cabinet that reflects what America is. And number two, to do everything that I can in every way to end all forms of racism in this country.
Fam.
And then...
Fam, you don't want to talk about that real quick? 'Cause that was
yeah.
so... You want to show the other one?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was...
wow.
I mean, he's obviously addressing racial issues, and he's addressing also the fact that a lot of the things that are being stated are completely false. He did actually have the highest people of color and younger people voting for him. and all of the things that the mainstream media had been saying until then were entirely false. So let's show this other part of the video as well.
We have a question from Chioma Iwaha. She works at a nonprofit here in Washington.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Part of the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow in the U.S. is the legacy of income inequality in the U.S. What is your position on reparations to the descendants of slaves?
Well, as I just indicated, there are massive disparities that must be addressed. There is legislation that I like, introduced by Congressman Jim Clyburn. It's called the 10-20-30 legislation, which focuses federal resources in a very significant way on distressed communities, communities that have high levels of poverty. So as I've just indicated, I think we have to do everything that we can to end institutional racism in this country. It is not acceptable to me that the rate of childhood poverty among the African American community is over 30% in this country. That is beyond belief. That African Americans die from cancer at higher rates than whites. So we're going to do everything we can to put resources into distressed communities and improve lives for those people who have been hurt from the legacy of slavery.
So what is your position specifically on reparations? I asked the question because Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro, they've indicated they want
what does
to
that mean? What do they mean? I'm not sure that anyone's very clear. What I've just said is that I think we must do everything that we can to address the massive level of disparity that exists in this country.
I'll tell you what they mean, because Elizabeth Warren has said black families have had a much steeper hill to climb. We need systematic structural changes to address that. Julian Castro has said, I have long thought that this country would be better off if we did find a way to do that, reparations.
Well, I agree with what Elizabeth said.
So you would support reparations?
But read what she said. What does that mean? She means, I think, I don't want to put words into her mouth, is what I said. Okay? In other words, as a result of the legacy of slavery, you have massive levels of inequality. It has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed now.
Okay. So as you all saw, basically what we had went over, they were trying to catch him on that. One of the reasons Bernie Sanders isn't saying particularly the word reparations is because, again, he doesn't know what that means. He doesn't know what she means. He doesn't know what Kamala means. He doesn't know what the word is going to mean in specificity. And trying to get him to say that and kind of like cornering him to that is gross. And it's very obvious what they're doing. And he is literally telling you, in more or less, like, he's going to do that, but he's not going to say that word because that word is divisive. That word is unspecific, and people need to stop, especially people on the left who are like, oh, well, he didn't do enough. No, he's doing everything he can. And, it doesn't matter because he can do no right, because since 2015, people have been accusing him of this. And yes, anybody can improve on especially a white person can improve on how, they communicate with the African American and Latin community. Of course, that's totally okay. But to say that he's not addressing these concerns is completely false.
I think, first of all, the first gentleman who asked that question that we shared with those clip, which is such a neoliberal hit job right there. It was just like wow, what a question. It's like you're stacking the audience. This is ridiculous. But I like the fact that he started off saying that, listen, the biggest issue we have, and let's not lose sight of this, is the wealth inequality. The overall arching picture. Now, within that issue, there's another issue that we have to address. But he still kept your mind in the frame that, hey, listen, we're all in this together. We have to fight the 1% together. We have to defeat that. And when we do that, we have to look at these issues and address them. And how we figure them out, fam. Like you said, the word reparations is so broad. It means so many things. And even the little jostle between him and Wolf, we have to figure them out. He's not ignoring them. He's addressing them. We have to figure them out together, and we will down the road. But the fact that he's kept his mind on the overall arching problem, which is wealth inequality through the oligarchs, is the big picture there. And I like the way he handled this part of the segment. I think he handled it well. And shame on that gentleman for coming up, or whoever put him up, to ask those questions in that way. And stuff. Well, he's done more for people of color than Hillary Clinton ever did. And the fact that everybody, and Kamala, we're talking about 2016 when this gentleman was referring to 2016. A lot of people used to come and say, pasta? I said, what's up? why didn't Bernie Sanders win the people of color vote? I couldn't understand why. I said, well, specifically because Bill and Hillary built that army, and they have everybody was in lockstep and barrel with them. And the Black Caucus, all these people, all these leaders like Williams and Clyburn, they all supported Hillary Clinton. It was business as usual, and that's what it was. It wasn't really merited from who has done more for African-American communities, and that answer is Bernie Sanders by far has.
And just going off of to what Pasta said, this fourth issue we have is the economic issues affect us all. It's us versus the 1%.
Yeah.
He was asked, how will you unite a polarized country when your policies are moving further away from where most Americans stand? But that's a false notion. In fact, most Americans want Medicare for all. Most Americans support a Green New Deal, and most Americans want to keep us out of war. At least the 99%. It is only the people, the elites, the 1%ers who are actually against us doing that. So making this seem like a radical idea isn't true. So I want to go ahead and show this quote from Ro Khanna.
Can I say something real quick before you do that? Because I don't believe that statement when Wolf Blitzer said that. I don't think things are more polarizing. I think that we're just a camera on everybody's phone now, and everything is just everything's out in the open now. Now you can't hide anything. If something's said, if something's done, a camera's out there. I believe that the vast majority of people are moving to a place where they are just loving with everybody. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have our issues, and we have people we have to convince, and people we have to sway their ideas who we think really aren't lockstep and barrel against the oligarchs. But for the most part, I think a lot of people are just moving to a place where they're just great, cool people out there. I hate to quote Joe Rogan.
So Ro Khanna said the truth is that Americans, as Pasta said, on both sides of the aisle support Bernie Sanders' platform. 70% support Medicare, 60% support debt-free college, 81% support the Green New Deal, 55% support raising the minimum wage. So the way they frame this is entirely false. And I have a little bit of the video to show right here at 52 minutes.
41, yeah. You know, go ahead when you get to the video. I'll be ready. There you go.
University. She's from Pennsylvania and an active member of the College Democrats.
Hi, Senator. We're arguably living in one of the most polarized political environments in American history. The Democratic Party is shifting more to the left and the Republican Party more to the right. But most Americans tend to fall in the middle of the political spectrum. How do you plan to unite such a polarized country if your policies are moving further away from where most Americans stand?
Okay, I look at it a little bit differently. That the country is polarized, I agree. And that has a lot to do with Trump's fostering a division and hatred, to be honest with you. And it concerns me very much that the level of number of hate crimes are going in this country. But here's the other side of that story, is that if you ask people in red states, conservative states, you go to Oklahoma and you go to Missouri, wherever you go, and you say, do you think it makes sense to give huge tax breaks to billionaires and then cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which is what the Republican leadership wants? You know what they say in red states? You're crazy. Of course we don't believe in that. Do you believe that health care is a right? Yeah, we do. Think we should raise the minimum wage? Yeah. Think we should have pay equity for women? Yeah, that makes sense. Think we should rebuild our crumbling infrastructure? Well, of course we could. Because my car nearly, disappeared in a pothole the other day. Okay? Do you think we should deal with climate change? Yeah, we should. Should we address racism and sexism and homophobia? Many people believe in the conservative states that we should. So I start off from the premise that we're not quite as divided as some would.
Okay, great. So let's it's okay.
We are not that divided.
Yeah, we're not.
It's
100% true.
The mainstream media is trying to put that up there. They're trying to kind of float that narrative, but it's not true. A lot of people, and that's the thing, it's not about being on either side. It's the populist message, what we all want as individuals.
Exactly. And just moving on real quick to North Korea. So Bernie Sanders praised Trump on meeting with Kim Jong-un. And, of course, CNN decided to make it a negative thing, saying that after criticizing Trump on several occasions, presidential candidate Bernie Sanders praised Trump, summit a North Korean leader. Yeah. Bernie looks at specific issues, of course, and then they decide to twist this. Bernie said it's okay in order to avoid nuclear war, that this is one of the very few things he actually agrees with Trump on more. So let's just go ahead and show his what he says on this video.
I love the way he does this. Now you got me in this spot saying all this stuff bad about Trump, and I'm going to say something good. Huge. Go ahead.
President Trump this week is meeting in Hanoi with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea. If you were president, would you meet with Kim Jong-un?
See, now, after all of the nasty things I said about Trump, let me say a good thing here, all right?
So presidential.
I think, look, nuclear weapons in the hands of a brutal, irresponsible dictator is a bad idea. And if Trump can succeed, in fact, through face-to-face meetings with Kim Jong-un and rid that country of nuclear weapons, that is a very good thing. So I think that the idea of going and meeting face-to-face with your adversaries is a good idea.
Great.
I would like the President of the United States to bring Iran and Saudi Arabia together, to bring the Palestinians and the Israelis together. All right?
And fam, he was really serious about it because he said, together. Bring everybody together. One of the most presidential parts of this town hall debate for me was right there. When you can say, hey, Trump is bad, we need to get rid of him, he's a liar, he's this and that. But wait, let's be honest, this is something good. And anybody who goes to talk about the de-escalation of nuclear weapons, it is a good thing, fam, not a bad thing. Am I right or wrong?
You're absolutely right. And the problem with a lot of the left is they refuse to actually listen to anything the opposition says, even if they say something right. And so that brings me to what I didn't like, where Bernie said. He said that he's all about unity, which is understandable. He's running to be president. He's going to have to need these votes. I get his tactic, even though I don't agree with it.
No.
I get it. I don't agree with it. But he knows his voters won't listen. He's told us many, many times, you know, if I tell you to vote for, don't listen to me. He told us never lose our sense of outrage. And he knows we won't listen. But let's go ahead and play real quick.
32-17?
1 minute and 37 seconds where he talks about unity.
Oh, that's 306. I'm sorry.
If you are the Democratic nominee, how will you defeat him? And if you are not the nominee, what will you do to help the nominee defeat him?
Well, let me just say two things. Number one, I hope and believe that every Democratic candidate will come together after the nominee is selected and make certain that Donald Trump is not reelected president of the United States. And I pledge certainly to do that. I hope I'm the nominee, but if I am not, I will work with that nominee. Trump has got to be defeated. And I'll tell you why. It's not only that we have a president who wanted to throw 32 million people off of the health care they had after promising that he would provide health care to everybody. It's not just a president who said he'd have a tax plan to benefit the middle class, but 83% of the benefits go to the 1%. I'll tell you, it's not just a president who said to the working class of this country, I am on your side, I'm not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And then he came forward with a budget, $1 trillion cut to Medicaid, $500 billion to Medicare, and $72 billion to the Social Security Disability Fund. But there's something even deeper. This president is the first president in the modern history of our country who is trying to divide our people up based on the color of their skin, the country they were born in, their sexual orientation, their gender, their religion. And that is an outrage. Our job is to bring our people together, not to divide them up. That's why Mr. Trump must be defeated.
Nice.
Exactly.
Woo!
We said it better ourselves. And,
it's so true. It's so true, too. But I don't want to hear that shit. Like, people like, oh, Trump's not a racist. He's not. He's a race baiter. He throws that language out there. He starts whistling or hitting the dog whistle or signaling to those people who do have those tendencies, and they go and vote for him. So whether he's a racist or not, fam, he definitely is a race baiter, and I love the way Bernie Sanders ended this part.
And the other part that we obviously don't like is the Russian narrative, which he has been on for a while. And the reason a lot of his supporters don't like it is because it's kind of talking about, you know, oh, this other country
it's
manipulating our elections. But it excuses exactly what the Democratic Party did in 2016. And a lot of his supporters feel betrayed because they worked really hard on his campaign, and you know, this isn't being discussed. So again, I understand where he's coming from. I understand how powerful that narrative is, but I also think it's actually not, you know, a wrong tactic. However, many centrists do believe this. So again, it's one of those things. And I'm going to go ahead because we have to kind of get going. I'm going to go ahead and
we
talk
all know.
about...
You've seen Bernie Sanders talk about it. He agreed
we
the fact
talked about
that
Russia
was doing that, and he said that he would tell Putin that it's not okay. And this is the part we were upset. And it's like, well, first off, Bernie, I would start saying we're going to stop meddling ourselves.
Right.
And that will be the first part to fix this whole solution. If we stop meddling, hopefully everybody else will stop meddling. I'm sorry, fam. Go ahead. Healthcare for all.
So Medicare for all is one of Bernie's biggest things, okay? He's always talking about how healthcare is a human right. We're the only major country not to guarantee it to their people. We spend more and we get nothing. We spend 2 times more of capita as any other country, and we still don't have it. And we're going to spend $50 trillion in the next few years if we don't address this issue. So here he talks about Medicare for all at 315
to 440.
Tara, go ahead.
Good evening. There's a lot of misinformation regarding your plan for universal health care. Would you please provide a brief overview of your plan and how it differs from that of other candidates?
Good.
Thank you.
The United States, shamefully, is the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. We've got 30 million people today without any health insurance. Many of you are underinsured with high deductibles and high copayments, and we pay the highest prices in the world by far for prescription drugs. So, issue number 1, I believe that health care is a human right, not a privilege, and we've got to guarantee health care to all of our people as a right. Number 2, if we're going to do that in a cost-effective way, if we're going to make sure that we are not spending huge amounts of money, and in fact, lower the amount of money we're spending. We're now spending almost twice as much per capita on healthcare as any other country. That is unsustainable. The estimates is that in the next 10 years, we're going to spend $50 trillion on healthcare. The only way to provide healthcare to all people in a cost-effective way is a Medicare for all single-payer program. All right? That's what I believe, and that's what I will fight for. Now, good news is, before I ran for president in 2016, that was considered to be a wild and crazy idea. Today, a significant majority of the people support that concept.
Okay. And so he's basically telling you what we already know. The majority of us support that concept. We still have some of the establishment trying to lie and say that they don't. And I'm going to pivot really quick to his attacks on the 1% bases and big pharma. Bernie Sanders knows that 3 people own more wealth than half of the entire United States. 1 out of 5 Americans can't afford their medicine. He's talked about how social media sites, he's posted about this actually into his social media sites, and talked about how children are dying because they can't afford their insulin, and
that should never happen. He even said
it
that.
Shouldn't happen.
It's disgusting to think that a child, a baby, a young one is going to die because we can't get them insulin because they're poor. What country do we live in, fam?
And we've had, we've seen in the media how a woman was jailed because she had all these medical bills. Our friend Nico House talked about that. There's just so many things. So Bernie, I'm going to let him address his plan to reduce drug costs, his plan to make big pharma accountable, and his plan to just make get these lobbyists out of power.
Remember the lobbyists that Donald Trump said he was going to drain the swamp?
At around
they just
2017.
expanded. Please.
The pharmaceutical industry is the most greedy entity in this country today. Today in America, if you can believe it, 1 out of 5 people cannot afford the medicine that they need. You talk about insulin. We have had on our social media, my Senate social media, parents talking about how their children died because they couldn't afford insulin.
Terrible.
The pharmaceutical industry last year made $50 billion in profit. $50 billion. They pay their CEOs outrageous levels of compensation. And 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the medicine they need. In my state of Vermont, elderly people cut their pills in half. Now, I have introduced, I think, the most sweeping set of legislation to deal with this issue. It does 3 things. Number 1, it has Medicare for the first time negotiating prices with the pharmaceutical industry. You know why our prices are so much higher than any other country on earth? In America, the drug companies could charge you any price they want. They could double, triple, quadruple the price. They get what the market will bear. Every other country on earth negotiates prices. And we don't, because the pharmaceutical industry has unbelievable money and unbelievable power. All right? So number one, Medicare negotiates prices. Number two, many of my Republican friends believe in free trade. Well, if you believe in free trade, why can't pharmacists and distributors purchase lower cost prescription drugs from Canada and other countries? Same exact medicine made in the same factories, bring them into America. Thirdly, roughly speaking, what Canada does. What Canada does is look at prices around the world, come up.
Okay. So there's that. And then let's talk about how Bernie Sanders pays for all his proposals. So we have this chart right here that you guys can look at. I'm not going to go through everything, but I'll share it on my Facebook again. He has a plan how to pay for college for all, how to pay for Social Security expansion, how to offer paid family leave, how to keep our the pensions, how to have the Polluter Welfare Act and Medicare for all. He has all of these plans laid out, exactly how he's going to pay for them. And this is one of the questions he's asked by a lot of Democrats and Republicans, exactly how he's going to pay for them. So at around 7 minutes and 26 seconds, he starts kind of going into that real quick. Yeah.
Many of your policies have been met with speculation about how they're going to be paid for. What would you propose as solutions to pay for your ambitious policy ideals?
Great question. Thanks. In the United States right now, we have more income and wealth inequality than any other country on earth. We have 3 people who own more wealth than the bottom half of America. We have the 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 90%. We have 46% of all new income going to the top 1%. Okay? So what we have in America today is a whole lot of wealth. But that wealth and income increasingly goes to the very, very wealthiest people in this country. So what I believe that in a democratic, civilized society, healthcare, is a right. Making sure that our kids can get a higher education is a right. That we rebuild our crumbling infrastructure is a basic need. That's going to cost money. But at a time when the people on top have so much, while the middle class shrinks and we have so many people living in poverty, if your question is, am I going to demand that the wealthy and large corporations start paying their fair share of taxes? Damn right, I will. All right?
That's how
I know you want to hear that, fam. Yeah. Damn right I will and stuff. and you know, everybody says this all the time. How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Well, you know, I mean, just the military budget alone, fam, is higher than the next 9 countries. Right. So we tax the rich. They pay their fair share. We end these wars, and you have enough money for us to have education, healthcare, infrastructure, the whole 9 yards.
Things that are basic in other countries, by the way. Things that we should have. Things that are taken for granted in other countries. We can't even get over here. We can't even get over here. So, fam, real quick, let's shift to the identity politics of, you know, Hillary's sexual allegations. Well, not Hillary. I mean, the sexual allegations that the Hillary camp has been, you know, propagating since 2016. He did address them. Yeah. He also talked about how he's going to specifically make sure that every single person that he employs understands that this is their right if they feel sexually harassed. He said he was very, very sorry because he got a lot of flack for saying he was busy running a campaign. And I can see how that statement might have been insensitive. But when you're in a campaign, when you're in any kind of huge organization, as Pasta and I, you know, we've kind of done these events and stuff. If you remember the AOC event, how things get lost because you can't deal with every single thing. And unfortunately, he's not going to be aware of every single thing going on. And so I'm glad he's taking the actions to actually, you know, change this. But I want to pivot also, fam, to his tax returns, how they pointed out his tax returns really nasty. And I want to show this video because...
You don't want to talk about you don't want to show the other video. You want to go to tax return.
Yeah.
All right, really, before we go on to that, I just want to say really briefly is that Fam and I know about the situation. The situation happened in our backyard. It was the Carmona situation, and everything was very foggy. There wasn't a lot of hard evidence. And not to say that something didn't happen, but it was accusations. And once again, it was so far removed from the Sanders campaign. We thought it was almost impossible for him to deal with it. But the thing that I love most is that he did acknowledge it. He's dealt with it. He's talked about it before he announced his campaign, and he talked about it last night.
And
he's taking it head on. I think he's been great about that. And the people who criticized him, saying Bernie Sanders is not your best friend, where are you at now? I want to hear your voice, because he took this head on. He didn't hide from it like most politicians would.
Right.
And he
said it would never happen again on his watch. Like,
said he was very disturbed.
He's doing
too.
a commitment. Yeah. He's, doing a commitment to it. And I did want to point out his tax returns, because even though he's doing all of these things right, they decided to highlight his tax returns. And by the way, he's probably one of the poorest, if not the poorest senator in all of Washington, D.C.
About transparency, Senator, will you release 10 years of your tax returns? As you know, Elizabeth Warren has decided to do that.
Yes.
What was the delay? Why haven't you done that so far?
Well, the delay is not, it'll bore, our tax returns will bore you to death. It's simply nothing special about them. It just was a mechanical issue. We don't have accountants at home. My wife does most of it, and we will get that stuff out.
So when do you think we'll be able to see your tax returns?
Sooner than later.
Well, what does that mean?
Soon.
Soon?
Yes.
Are they ready to be released already?
I think that we have to just do a few more little things, but to check them out. But they're ready.
And why didn't you do it the last time around? You were under a lot of pressure to do so.
I wasn't under a lot of pressure. Well, I didn't end up doing it because I didn't win the nomination. If we had won the nomination, we would have done it.
All right. Senator,
but again, I don't want to shock you. Well, they're very boring tax returns.
We'll look forward to seeing them. All right, Senator. Thank you very
much. The way they push it, the way it moves, it's like CNN. What a hit job. You're pushing him on this incident. And wait, Bernie Sanders, his tax rate, it's boring, fam. But yet they still want to make an issue out of it. Like, why didn't you do it before? What's the delay? How soon? Like, give me a break. Stop. What are you going to find?
That's the least. I mean, more. That's like the least of our worries.
I don't even know if it was an issue.
All of us. Like it's like Bernie Sanders is doing all these things, and they're so myopically focusing on tax returns because they really don't have very much else to focus on. And I want to point out something. Bernie Sanders was always the one that got criticized for saying our number one issue is climate change.
Yeah.
In 2015 and 2016, he
constantly
talked about that, and he got laughed at. Well, we have less than 12 years. We have about, 10 to 11 years to actually address this issue before we're past the point of no return. So Bernie Sanders actually kind of clapped back a little bit and at all the, the false accusations he got and all the criticisms.
In fact, with more and more frequent flooding, it already is. What is your plan to help these rural communities in the poorest part of our state to fight climate change?
What you're asking is maybe, a couple of years ago, I don't know if you were moderating it, Wolf, I don't know if it was you or CBS, I can't remember. And somebody asked me, they said, what is the major national security issue facing this country? And you know what I said? I said climate change. And people laughed. Wasn't that funny? Well, people are not laughing now because they have read the scientific reports and they know that if we don't get our act together in the next 12 years or so, there's going to be irreparable damage. So let me lay it out on the line. We are going to have to not only take on Trump and his deniers, but we are going to have to take on the power of the fossil fuel industry. That is the coal companies and the oil companies and the gas companies. And we are going to have to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Now, the good news is that we know how to do that. The technology is there, and that technology will only improve. And here's the other good news when we make that transformation. We're going to create millions of good-paying jobs, weatherizing our homes, changing our transportation system, moving aggressively into wind and solar and other sustainable energies. But this, to me, is an existential crisis that impacts not just you and me and our generation, but our kids and our grandchildren. And we must accept the moral responsibility of leaving these kids, future generations, a planet that is healthy and habitable. And I will do everything I can to have the rest of the world.
Oh, he's still going.
But we can bring India and China and Russia, countries all over the world together in the fight to transform our energy system and save this planet.
Oh, Perry.
Yeah.
Shout out to Perry for a contribution on YouTube, by the way.
Winkle the Bernie bro, my boy Perry. I also want to send some love real quick. Do you want to talk about this real quick?
Go ahead.
Let me just send some love because we have so many people online. They have great opinions out there. Edward Klein, David Moschella, Crozette Isles, The Cool Man, where you at? We love you, The Cool Man, in your opinions. Tim Nichols, Brian Cosby, Kimberly S., Edward Klein, Vlad the Dragon. We love you. Jilly Love, I see you on Ron's thing. John Davey, Ed Wagner. We love you a lot. Nina Rata, I didn't say hi to you. Hank Moultrie, thank you so much, and all those people once again for the Super Chat contribution, fam. Talk about this, fam, over here, the polarization. We talk about this all the time. When Bernie Sanders was the first to go out there and admit it, and people laughed at him, called him an alarmist. And now, where we at?
Exactly. We're here with climate change. And I love how he addresses the issue. First of all, what a contrast to Dianne Feinstein, telling those kids basically to die. And by the way, there is a video that's about 30 years old that shows Bernie Sanders talking to kids about climate change. And so you can see that's what we're fighting for here. We're fighting against that centrist mentality that doesn't care about the climate because they're not going to be here. The same thing with these Republicans. They're old. They're not going to be here. They're going to be dead. Bernie Sanders won't be here either, but he cares because it is a moral obligation to care about what is going to happen with these generations later. But it's also an economic thing. It's very smart economically to transition our industries from fossil fuels into more green technologies, and we can do that. And the Green New Deal has a plan to do that, and Tulsi Gabbard's plan, the OFF Act, is actually even more specific and actually prevents the fracking, which is something that the Green New Deal actually doesn't talk about. And I think, with all of these ideas coming up, Bernie Sanders is right on the money in addressing an issue that is already affecting us. I mean, it snowed in Pasadena last week.
I got video.
Like, he has a video. It's crazy. It shouldn't be snowing in Calabasas and Malibu in Pasadena. That's not okay. Like, obviously, these are issues that are affecting us already, but will be affecting us later on. So I love how he addressed that. I love how he came out winning from back in 2016 when people mocked him. Now everyone's like, oh yeah, let's jump on the climate change bandwagon. But guess what? You got to look at the people who are talking about things when they weren't popular. Those are the people you want around, and Bernie Sanders is one of those people.
Really quick shout out, because I know we're going to get out of here really soon. We got to expose some of these people. I hope you got You've Been Exposed, because we want to tell you about who the audience was. But shout out to Rocky Lee Bellinger. We love you, Rocky. Jason Small, amazing. Melissa Michelson, Betty Dumas, Steve Woolbrant. We love you. Roshan Akula, Miss Silver, thank you very much for tuning on in. Everyone. We really do appreciate it. Pamela Strandquist, I already said Betty Dumas. I want to send you another love out. GM Shower, Johnny Majorca, who's also our extraordinary engineer, Nick Obergen. Thank you for watching, and thank you for the super chat contributions. Fam, I think we should expose some of these people who are out there.
I think we do need to expose all of these people. But before we expose them, let me just say that the whole thing that the centrists want to do is beat Donald Trump. They're all like, yeah, we need to get Donald Trump out. Okay, guess what? The best person to beat Donald Trump is Bernie Sanders.
I still believe he's the only one, fam.
And Tulsi's a great contender. Yeah. But I think Bernie Sanders has the entire momentum from 2015 back, and that is why he's the most likely to beat him. And nobody else in polling so far has come close, and it's crazy. And he actually addresses that, like why he's the most qualified one to beat Donald Trump. And let's go to the 57 minutes and 57 seconds.
Democrats want a candidate who can beat Donald Trump. Why do you think you're the most qualified to beat Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, let me say that there are a lot of really good candidates in this race, and many of them are personal friends of mine. I've known Elizabeth Warren for like 25 years, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we discuss policy and not personality and not make it ugly. But as I look at what happened in the last election, I look at states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Florida. I think we could win those states. I think the message of our campaign is that we've got to bring our people together, black and white and Latino, bring our people together around an agenda that creates a government that works for all of us, that we deal with the horrific trade policies that we have, that we raise the minimum wage, that we make education available to working families, child care available, that we guarantee health care to all people. I think that that is a message that will resonate in many of the countries, in many of the states that Trump won.
Thanks to Senator Bernie Sanders, and thanks to our audience members for their questions.
Yeah.
Fam, why don't you tell these people, though? I mean, like, we know it's about the populist message. It really is going to resonate. It's going to, a person who can get independents and some Republicans is the only person who's capable of beating Donald Trump. Right now, Tulsi's showing that she can get some of that vote, but Bernie Sanders is showing that he can get a ton of that vote.
Yeah,
and I think
and he's raised $10 million. Let's be real. $10 million. And you know what? At the town hall, during the town hall, when people were getting angry at the way these questions were framed, understandably so, people kept donating him. They kept donating more money to him because they were like, "Oh yeah, well let's show you this," and we were all like, "Yeah,
It's like they have an adverse effect when they try to attack. We just come back and say, "No, Bernie, go get him, and here's a few dollars to go help you."
Exactly. So speaking of that, fam,
yes,
today Perry was one of the people that was talking about this too first, and I also Carlos Martinez was another one that was talking about this. Bernie Sanders' questions were actually stacked against him, and they were manipulated against him. There is this entire thread, if we can go on this thread, just showing pretty much how it was manipulated against him, and all these people that were just random people were actually not random people.
Candidate,
at
party
all.
chair,
they were
lobby intern,
lobbyists,
development director.
So many people. So many of these people were just literally one of the women that asked the question, her aunt worked for Bill Clinton. This other woman was a lobbyist for the state of
the picture with all 6 of them.
Media, is a state media writer and a lobbyist intern. This other woman's a development director. Another woman was a candidate. I mean, you can just see on all these pictures that we have, and we have the article as well. But Kioma, I don't know how to say her last name. I'm just going to say Kioma, works for a nonprofit, and her aunt worked for Bill Clinton, and we have pictures here proving that. And then we have this public policy intern, which is one of the most viewed ones. She's the one that asked him that question about we didn't see the video, but as a woman, you know, how he didn't respond well to the allegations of sexual assault. She is actually a lobbyist for one of the biggest lobbyist firms in DC, Cassidy and Associates. And then we also have this, I think, over here on the article. Let me see if I can find it. Johnny, do you have the article up?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go through the article real quick.
So what's crazy is that about that article is that the tweet, the first one, is gone.
Yeah.
Well, put your face up when you talk so the audience can see who's talking to you, Johnny Tsunami. Don't think that you can't just... So, Johnny, what were you saying about the tweet?
The tweet is gone. It was there before the show, and then
she deleted her Twitter. By the way, I got this information just like a couple hours ago. She deleted her Twitter, deleted everything. That girl was the one that I was talking about was being a lobbyist. I believe that is the one that deleted her entire profile,
sure
and you can't find her anywhere now.
The beauty of the intranet is that we can find out who was saying what and when they were saying it. And we were saying, when I was watching this with Johnny last night, when I got home from work, I'm like, Johnny, this is like a neoliberal hit job over here. They're stacking the audience. They're throwing hard questions at him. But let me say this much, fam. Let's go to a big screen so we can kind of follow us out when we say this. The difference between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders is when you ask Donald Trump one of these loaded questions, when you go out a hit job at Donald Trump, what does he do? He insults, he smears, he yells, he degrades people, he throws his tantrum, and a lot of supporters are like, yeah, he's fighting back. But Bernie Sanders doesn't do that. He stays calm, he looks you in the eye, and no matter how hard the question is, whether it's a hit job or not, he answers the question to the fullest that you can answer it. And that's the great thing about Bernie Sanders. He showed why yesterday, despite a stacked audience, despite hit jobs and questions that were loaded questions, that he deserves to be president. And that's why I love Bernie Sanders.
And I want to point out that there was an Asian girl named Yoon Jung Seo. She worked for the Katz Watson Group. And on Open Secrets, this Katz Watson Group has a PAC, a Ready for Hillary, just a bunch of neoliberal, centrist.
Look at number 9 there, Ready for Hillary. You know what I'm saying?
You're telling me that this is coincidental? You're going to tell me that all of this wasn't planned? I mean, it's insane. Then we have the circuit court clerk, Jacqueline Smith,
Every
single
person who asked questions.
Democratic of Virginia. Pretty much, there was a couple of young kids that aren't on this list who were actual college-age kids. And then there was the majority of them, though, however. Oh, yeah, this one. I really want to point out this guy right here. The Troy Dante, the one who asked him that question about people of color.
Yeah.
It says he's a community leader. Actually, if you look at his Twitter, and his LinkedIn, he is a public relations executive and chair of Advisory Neighborhood Commission. He has a BA for the District of Columbia. He's in PR. Now, I have a degree in PR too. Public relations is a very cutthroat industry. It's pretty much framed on perception, not reality.
Who's that right there?
And he is the founder and CEO.
Is that a picture of him and Cory Booker, fam?
And he has a picture with Cory Booker.
Are you saying he was an establishment kind of candidate?
A little bit.
Person,
just a little bit.
Founder? Well,
just a little bit. And so all I'm saying is this is not coincidence. I mean, this is what the tactics that CNN, the mainstream media, the establishment are all resorting to make sure that Bernie Sanders gets pummeled with these questions. But to their dismay, unfortunately for them, Bernie Sanders handled the majority of these questions pretty well. And the only issue that people are, kind of pushing him on is Venezuela on one end, and on the other complete opposite end, the reparations, which I think it would be smart of leftists to stop attacking him on that, because he actually gave a decent answer based on the information that he was provided. And basically, I honestly think it's important that we all share this thread about knowing who these people are, because look, one already deleted her entire social media just because of this, because they don't want you to know. They don't want you to know this. And yeah, it seemed obvious to us while watching the town hall. God, these questions seem so framed. These people seem so stacked against him. Yeah, it's obvious to us, but guess what, you guys? It's not obvious to the general audience. It's not obvious to people who are outside our bubble. And we need to look at this as to thinking, okay, maybe they don't know. So we need to share this information, because a lot of people didn't believe us in 2016. They called us conspiracy theorists. They said that we were just angry we lost.
Yeah.
This is how we start.
About that? And fam, let me just, because I really want to, you put a post up today. I wish we had it. I thought you would have it up, and what you said is because it's almost what Chris Hedges has said. And the reason why we do this is a lot of people say, well, I can find the same information on the Real News Network. I can watch Jimmy Dore. I can watch RT. But it's what we must continue to do, is regurgitate what has been said, because not everybody knows. It's almost as if Chris Hedges said, it's like we're mice squeaking against an avalanche. But you know what? Squeak we must, and we must continue to squeak. So what you hear here, pass it on. Keep talking about it. It hasn't been said enough. They loaded that audience, and people will say, whatever. But a lot of people don't know that. You know what I'm saying?
A lot of the centrists
continue to squeak and yell and regurgitate this information, because it's important, because the everyday people are consumed with work and taking care of their kids and putting food on the table. So we must continue to inform them. So take this news, telephone it, and pass it on.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And Fam does too. I know he does. And also, like Pasta said, please pass this on, pass this thread up. I have it on my Facebook. I know it's on a bunch of groups. It's all over Twitter right now. People need to be made clear that
Johnny Tsunami, you got something
Johnny has one last thing before we go.
There's breaking news, guys. This happened about an hour ago.
House votes to block Trump's national emergency.
House votes to block Trump's national emergency.
Oh, wow.
That's why we were here on the CONVO couch. We saw. So, I mean, I would hope the House would block it and stuff, but I don't know. We have to check in the laws and stuff, what he can do, what his powers are. But Bernie Sanders said last night, as a political man, I would say he will probably not get his wall.
Nope.
No.
Not at all.
Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. We want you to like and subscribe to our YouTubes.
Please.
We go on our YouTubes, our Convo Couch YouTubes. We need some love there. We're on Facebook. We have an Instagrizzy. We have a Twitter. And we want you to sign up for all those things. I am Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella, guys. Subscribe to Convo Couch and MCSC Network. Thanks for watching.
For Johnny Tsunami,
Thanks,
Convo
Johnny.
out.
Convo out. Bye.